a passion project.
Right.
This is a topic of mine, end user adoption. And so let's go ahead and start going through the slides. I'll have lots of things to show. And so feel free to pop any questions you have in the chat, or come off mute and just flat out ask me. I do have a full content, so we'll go through everything, but I did put the slide deck, PDF to the slide deck in, because there are some URLs that I'm going to be sharing, and they're in the chat. So this is a little bit about me. I live in Charleston, South Carolina right now, although I lived in New York City longer than anywhere else. So I feel like I'm a New Yorker at heart. I've been a Microsoft partner for 31 years. And as Suresh mentioned, I started my journey in ERP, and I was always working on reports and creating better intelligence for all of our customers over the years. And as I started adopting before Power BI was even what is now Power BI, we were talking earlier, before the session started, about those early days, and Microsoft kind of like pulled me over from GP land into Power BI, and I happily complied. So I love living in the Power BI space, the Azure, the data platform space, and then I also do some Power Platform things as well. I still work with GP users a lot, and I work with Business Central users a lot. So I typically focus on ERP type reporting in the small to medium size market, or just below the enterprise level, but not exclusively. So I've worked with customers of all sizes and all complexities. I'm also a Microsoft MCT, and I love hobbies. I love learning. So let's move on. So let's get into the real important part. I mentioned earlier that this is my topic of the year, user adoption, because I thought a lot about it, and I thought a lot about what is happening in the world of Power BI, because I've noticed that initially a lot of people were wanting to go through training like you would with any application, but there is a lot of opportunities to learn Power BI, including user groups just like this one. So as a result, a lot of people are diving in on their own, which I think is fantastic, but then they're kind of getting stuck a little bit. And then what do they need to do? And they're trying to get it, the usage of Power BI more pervasive in their own organizations. And what do they do? So again, this is something that I've thought a lot about. Now, I want to start out by talking about who this session is for. Now, obviously we're all here. So who am I going to be talking about, and who am I going to be talking about for the use of and for the end results? So most of this content, most of my recommendations have to do with these particular roles inside of Power BI. And the middle section here is basically a flow that Microsoft has in some of their documentation. And I've just categorized it into different users. And in some companies, it could just be one person doing all three roles. It could be multiple people doing each role. But in any event, this is who this session is for. I'm really talking to people who do data ingest, or developers of Power BI, the ones that do the data modeling, the data analysts, the ones that are creating the reports, or the report designers, and somewhat the admins who are sharing it, but less them, and more about who I'm talking to, who actually does the modeling and the report design. And the session is about the consumer, the report consumer, or the end user. And when I use the term end user, this is who I'm talking about. And you hear me refer to end user over and over again in this particular presentation. Now, before I go back, it's important we think about the end user. So I'm going to go back to my role, my job, basically, before I got involved in technology 31 years ago. So right out of college, I was working with Hampton Inns. I became a general manager of a Hampton Inn. And this was so early on, it was the fourth Hampton Inn. And I was not the first general manager there. There were about 40 Hampton Inns when I started working for them. But one of the things that we did, because we had a business hotel, almost all of our occupants or our guests that stayed with us were business travelers. And we obviously travel for business, most of us. So we're that business traveler that they're talking about. Now, that meant our hotel was full Sunday through Thursday, but almost empty on Friday and Saturday. So every Friday, I would go to the front desk and I would say, you can negotiate down to X dollars. And that was because, as it was actually, I worked for a corporate hotel. It was owned by Holiday Corporation. That's who owned Hampton Inns at the time, the people who had Holiday Inns and Harrah casinos and Crown Plazas and blah, blah, blah. So they had us do every week. We knew what our profit per occupied room was. So I knew every Friday I could go to the front desk and say, you can negotiate down to this rate, because I knew I would still be making money and it would increase my occupancy. So that gave them some control in being able to handle situations and prevent people from just walking out the door because the prices were high. And that was because they had that intelligence that I gave them. So they knew what they could negotiate down to. So it's really important that we share that possession of knowledge all the way down to as many end users as possible, depending on our own organization. Now, this session that we're going to be doing, talking through today, is more of an idea session. And when we get closer to some of the stories and examples, then I really hope that some of you will chip in and share as well. I find that to be particularly helpful as we get through. It's not a how-to, so I'll be talking about things that you probably already know about. Some you will have already implemented, but I want to talk about them in terms of the end users and their experience. So it's a way for you to be thinking about that. And the agenda is to start by talking about why user adoption is so important and why it's a pet project of mine. It's the same answer, and why it's worthy of us to stop and think about it today. And then we're going to talk about the resistors, the people, the end users who resist the implementation or the strategy of implementing a Power BI system. And we're going to be doing that through the use of stories and idea sharing, hopefully idea sharing, and Q&A at the end. So let's dig into why user adoption is so important. So in 1989, we all, those of us in the, well, I guess we're all in the US here, there was a movie, Field of Dreams. And remember the tagline from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Well, that is certainly not the case with any kind of technology. I've never seen a technology where if you build it, they automatically come. It takes someone getting excited about it and encouraging other people to become, or pull in other people, word of mouth, and telling the story, getting other people excited about it. And I'm not just talking about the main person in the company doing marketing or advertising. I'm talking about people who use the system to say, "Ooh, hey, you got to try this." In the case of John, and you guys notice it with your customers, someone eats at your restaurant and you say, "Oh, wow, I had a great meal at Lazy Dog. Everyone should go and eat there." So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Now, I had a journey myself, and it was very similar. So I started in technology. I already shared that with you 31 years ago. So this was back in DOS days. Actually, the first computer I worked on had this same monitor, for example, and I was a Lotus 123 user. I loved it. And when Excel came out, my husband, who is my business partner, he has always been an innovator, and he got Excel for us and he said, "You should try it." And I was like, I'm happy with Excel or with Lotus. I love it. Why would I change? I know it, it's cool. Well, I had a column that I had to parse or break into several other columns. And that wasn't quite an easy task in Lotus 123. And I couldn't remember exactly how to do it. I'd done it before, but it wasn't something that I did a lot then. I mean, it was 31 years ago. So I was struggling with trying to do it. And I thought, you know what, I'll just try it in Excel and see if it works. And darn if I didn't find text to columns and nothing flat. And at that moment, I became an Excel champion. I said, okay, I'm going to switch. I'm going to start using Excel. And I started telling everyone about my experience. And that even took me on a journey into becoming an innovator as well, thinking, oh, what else is out there? So we'll talk a little bit about what a champion is in a minute. I have a feeling you could tell by the word what it is, but I became a champion of Excel that day. 31 years. Well, that wasn't 31 years ago. That was probably about 25 years ago because it took a while for Excel to come out. But I'm still a champion of Excel, and I'm still an innovator when it comes to trying new technologies and doing things. Now, the first website that I want to talk to you about is there is a Microsoft Power Platform adoption site. Now, it's mostly for the rest of the Power Platform, not for Power BI, but there is some fantastic information to get from here. And if you were to, let me slide this over a minute and get my pen. If you were to, here's the website down at the bottom, and again, you could get it from the PDF format below. But when you get to the site, this section right here that says user adoption, there is this download workbook. And if you download that, it's like an 80 some odd page PowerPoint file, and it's got some phenomenal material in it. This is one of the screens it has, and I absolutely love this. And this talks about the whole process itself. Now, there is a big part of the process of working with and developing champions and doing things. But again, it talks about everybody and everything you need to do. And this is the section right here that we're going to be focusing on today, with a nod to the onboarding of employees. So you could see right here, creating this champion readiness and building the plan. And this is where we're going to be focusing today. Now, this, I've got a couple of slides that come from two different places, or come from this deck. And I just want to go through some of them here and in another place. But this is another slide I wanted to talk about, because I think this one's real important too, because when you are defining your team, we are used to, anytime we have a project, figuring out who our executive sponsor is and so forth. But what we need to make sure we define is who are our champions in the project and who's part of our nurturing team. These are critical parts of creating good user adoption. And again, we'll talk about why user adoption is important in just a moment. I want to go back and talk about what a champion is right now. And you could see this also has where I got this information from, which is a web page on creating champions. And champions they're an essential part of bringing any kind of strategy into a system, not necessarily even are exclusive to technology, but any kind of adoption. You need to have people that become the go-to person in the company. I told you my Excel story. When I became the Excel champion, people knew, okay, she knows a little bit about Excel, so we're going to start coming to Belinda and asking Belinda about Excel. And I was excited about Excel. That's part about what being a champion is. So a champion is going to go outside of their job roles, and they're going to even start offering information on their knowledge way beyond their job. And they're going to help influence their colleagues into staying up with technology, into getting excited about it, into wanting more and making your project a bigger and bigger success. Now, can you implement Power BI strategy without champions? Yes, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's going to be very difficult. And for any of you that are consultants, you might even end up in a situation where you get fired before the project actually happens. That's happened to me, where I didn't get champions in time. And I could tell tons and tons of story on implementing different technologies where I've had to struggle with people when I didn't have a clear champion. And even in the early days when I didn't think about learning to create and foster champions. And so that's quite the big deal. Now, when you create champions, then they start influencing others. And then all of a sudden you look like the wave on the left, right? This is how your company's working in unison and growing and looking powerful. And without champions, you look like the wave on the right. That one individual all by themselves, just doing nothing and looking silly and everybody just kind of rolling their eyes at them. So you really need to make sure you include champions, because if you want data culture in your company, you're going to have champions that are constantly working at the peer level and promoting it. So they're promoting it to other users when you're not in the room, not just when you're in the room. Now, before we get into some of the details, I do want to cover this marketing rule. Actually, my degree many years ago was in marketing and with a minor in English. So nothing to do with technology or even accounting for that matter. So it's quite hysterical that technology, particularly accounting and technology, became my field of expertise. But there is something called a 311 rule. And the 311 rule is, and I actually learned this from Tom Peters, a business guru from the 80s, not in college. But when something good happens, you tell 3 people. And when something bad happens, you tell 11. And this is true. So let's say I go to a fast food restaurant and they get my order all wrong and they took forever. And I would tell 11 people about this horrible experience I had there. I go to Lazy Dog restaurant and I'm treated like a queen and the food is fantastic and it's for, it's reasonably priced and it was just so fantastic. I can't wait to go again. I'm only going to tell 3 people. That means we need to promote 4 champions for every one person that is a resistor to the new technology. And so that way, that's the only way we can get the leverage to have more people excited about it than fighting against it. So to influence the bulk of the people in our company to start getting this feel of I've got to have a Power BI strategy in my life, then we're going to have to work on creating 3 times as many or 4 times as many champions as we have resistors. So let's talk about why some people resist or dissent. Microsoft uses the term dissent. I use the term resist. And then again, here is that some more slides from that slide deck. This is just to remind me of that. So resistance is normal. So just because somebody's resisting doesn't mean that they're just a horrible person or curmudgeon or difficult, right? So it doesn't mean that at all. There's a lot of reasons why people will resist. And one of the reasons that I'm very familiar with. So in my own family, I have several family members who have something called social anxiety disorder, which isn't being afraid of social situations. Instead, it's the fear that people are judging you. And even though your head is like, I know they're not judging me, you still feel that way. And because of that, sometimes they are reluctant to step up and say, oh, yep, I like that, right? They'll wait. They don't want to be the one standing alone if it turns out to be something that nobody likes. So there's a lot of reasons that people resist, and we just need to get to know our users a little bit to try to start working on those. And these are some techniques. It's in the handout or in that slide deck I told you about that you could use to work with. And I like to put this in here because you really need to listen to your user. So you're going to need to have a couple of talks with a few individuals to really make sure your plan is successful. And as I point this out, then it needs to be part of your overall plan from the very beginning. You need to talk to the leaders of the project within the company, or if you're a consultant within your customer's company, to say, okay, there's going to be some resistance here. So let's just talk about what we're going to be doing to overcome some of it. And then we'll talk about that on a regular basis as part of our whole factor of success. So make sure you talk about that at the very beginning so you could start addressing it. And then this is the last slide from that deck I'm going to show. But what I am showing for this is the section on the left. We're going to cover most of these. I left off the developer one and I combined 2 together. And so as a result, these are the themes that we're going to be talking about today as the common resistance themes. And these are people don't have time. They don't know what they want to build. They're not passionate or warming up because they don't see the value. In other words, they don't get what's in it for them. Or people are worried there's not going to be sufficient training for the new ways of working. And then finally, people just don't like change. I mean, that's just it. And some of those people, it's like, I know my job. I don't want my task to change because I'm happy with the way things are. So these are the themes that we're going to be talking about for the rest of our time together. And before we start digging into them, I want to point out, this is, I already mentioned Tom Peters was one of my favorite business gurus, and he was from the 80s, but in the 2000s, Simon Sinek is my favorite business guru. He's right up there with Malcolm Gladwell and Seth Godin, but he's my favorite. And he has this great book, Start With Why. I also love Leaders Eat Last. But one of the quotes that he just put, I follow him on Facebook, and he just tweeted this: value is something people feel, not something we tell them they get. And I loved this because this reminded me of something that working with Great Plains, we had been told for years and years when trying to sell software, and that is that people buy benefits, they don't buy features. And so we need to make sure we're showing people the benefit, what's the value they get out of it, and everybody, all of the end users, so that they'll adopt it more and more and more. And one of the things that I like to do is I play this game with users, and I call it a game because I want them to, it's an unusual question to ask someone when you're implementing it, let's say an accounting system or any kind of technology, is I'll ask them, if I could do anything to make your job easier besides answer the phone, what would it be? And I always add besides answer the phone because it breaks up, it makes it a little, gives it a little levity, but also because I want them thinking outside what they think I could do for them. Right? I want them to go above and beyond, because it is surprising how often they'll say something like, oh, the filing is always stacking up, it takes me forever. It's like, okay, so let's talk about what you're filing. And we might find ways to avoid having so much paper and avoid the filing time. And if I've saved them a couple hours a week, their job's going to be more enjoyable, their life's going to be better, they're going to have more time to be efficient at what they were hired to do, besides just filing paper in a filing cabinet that they're never going to look at again. So those are the kinds of things we need to do as we talk to people. So let's begin our journey here. So these are our new end users. There's always an innovator. You can see her on the left. She's going to be ready to adopt something new right out of the box, and she'll decide whether she likes it after she's neck deep in it. And then on the far right, there's always a dissenter, someone who is probably going to be your nemesis for the better part of your journey. So that's the person you're going to have to work with. And then there's everyone else in the middle. And it's those middle people that we want to focus on the most. We want to maintain nurturing with our innovator because she's going to be key for us. But for everyone in the middle, these are the people we want to focus on as we go along. So let's start talking about those common reasons for resistance. The first one, people don't have time. So I had a one customer that I was visiting, and they had been my customer for years and years and years. And I was going to visit the accounting office, and I was meeting with the controller, and I asked the question, and he shouldn't have been surprised because he's known me forever, that I was going to ask this question: if I could do anything to make your job easier, what would it be besides answer the phone? And he didn't have an answer for me right away. He thought about it. And at the end of the meeting, he said, I know. In our accounting system, you could remove empty batches. And I started questioning then, why do you have empty batches? And he started telling me the story about how, well, I won't get into the whole story, but suffice it to say that as I kept drilling down, I discovered that the real problem was that there were so many in small batches in payables where they would enter in an invoice, and then he would have to look at the all of the invoices in there, make sure they were coded to the general ledger property, and approve them so they could be posted and processed. And it was difficult because they were in such small pieces. And so he was having somebody go through and move them all, waste their time moving them all to a single one so he could review them. But it was a real laborious task, even in one big batch. So I created this. This is something I did early on in my Power BI days. I created a Power BI report that looked at all unposted batches and payables. And it looked at everyone where you could sort it by vendor, you could sort it by batch, you could sort it by department, you could see where everything was coded. And what you see on the right, and I don't have it connected to Power Apps, but I actually had a Power App in there. And the Power App would enable whatever batch I had selected, it would enable me to approve the batch right from the screen. So it would not only, there was no printing out all the reports, was just what he had to do, and then sit with a ruler and go through and review them all one at a time. He could now do them en masse. So I saved him tons of time doing that, and he could approve it on the spot. And on top of that, his AP person wasn't having to spend time moving it. And this saved him about 4 hours a week when all was said and done. That's 208 hours a year. So absolutely, I mean, if you could put all that together in a vacation, that's a pretty nice vacation just on the savings of this report. So needless to say, he became a champion for me because he saw value. And as he started sharing it with other people in the company, they became interested as well. So when I'm looking at the end user list, that alone would make someone want to come over to the champion side. A similar story someone was telling me based off the same question, how difficult it was for the part of the AR department to do credit reviews, or actually part of the sales department to do credit check reviews on orders. So if an order came in for a certain dollar amount, it was automatically put on hold until they could approve the credit was available for the customer. So again, a very similar report that would look at one particular order. And then I could see information that was not only posted, but unposted to come up with numbers that wasn't even in the accounting system. Meaning here is the total AR, this 7,200. There's $10,000 worth of payments that haven't been applied to the account yet, but they're in the system. And then there's $2,000 of open invoices out there. So the net of all those, if those two got posted, they'd have a credit balance. They have $40,000 in credit, so I could easily remove the hold. I've even gone so far as to some screens allow people to change the credit limit on this particular screen. So again, this is another Power BI report done right in the system. So another reason that somebody might want to change. In other words, I was looking for the worst itch for these two people, and I was able to scratch it. And as a result, they became happier and they became champions. Now, another reason that someone might not want to become champions. Oh, hi, Fernando. Another reason people might not want to be or might not want to be champions is they don't know what to build. This is a very common thing. And as we know, as report designers and as people who do data modeling, one of the things we know about this is that we really don't want those people building anyhow, right? It takes a data modeling person or a data analysis to really get in and do some of the building. What they really want to do is navigate around when we're talking about those end users and maybe make something, make their own kind of custom report, if you will. So on this, I introduced personalizations. This is something that has been out in Power BI for a while. So as we're looking at personalizations here, the user would highlight the report in the Power BI service. They click on the personalization icon right here. And then now all of a sudden they could change what kind of visualization that they're using. Then they could change the axis and even making it a small multiple, so they could make changes any way that they see fit. And if it's in the service, or especially if it's in a Power BI app, they could go ahead and bookmark it and then make their own custom page that makes them happy. So I do want to stress that modeling must be done by people who understand the concept of modeling and are doing it correctly. But if you create a nice data model and then you have these reports out there, then you're kind of controlling that single source of truth, and the ability to allow users at that point to come in and make changes on their own is going to get them excited about doing this on their own. And for those of you who've never played with personalizations, you could just simply turn it on by going to File, Options, and Options and Settings, and then Options, Current File, Report Settings, and then turn it on. If you want some control over the fields that people are using, you could use Tabular Editor to create perspectives to do so. And if there's the current version of Tabular Editor is a paid tool, but the good people at SQL VI, the Italians, the people who wrote basically the DAX Bible, they've made Tabular Editor 2 available as open source. So you can get that for free and create your own perspectives so that you could control which user has access to which field, so you can get that extra control. So when we're back at our users, just by giving the option for perspectives, we can move another person over to our champion side. Now, people are not passionate about this project. This is another reason for resisting. And I don't want to say that they are dissenters, because they're just resisting it at this point. Remember, these are the what's in it for me people. And again, going back to this quote that people buy benefits, they don't buy features. So we always need to be showing people in anything we do, all of our data stories should be about benefits as well. And this is a great one. This is the Decomp Tree over on the right. I love this. And in this particular example, they even have a button down here at the bottom, so you could select whether or not you want this last option to be high risk or low risk. So you can kind of control some of this information, but this is the backorder percent and a decomp tree, a standard out of the box AI visual that all you have to do is tell it what you want to measure and what are potential explained by categories. And I like to throw the whole kitchen sink at it. And then as I realize maybe something's redundant, remove it out at that point. This is a how to do data analysis 101, basically. So this gives someone who doesn't know how to do data analysis the opportunity to play in a data and not know what they need to ask and still get information that is new and exciting to them or beneficial to them. So this is something that I love showing, along with the key influencer. That's another one that I find particularly valuable. And there are a couple other ones as well. And with this, you're going to move somebody over as well, someone who hasn't been necessarily someone educated in how to do data analysis and review all the data. And this is another one of my favorites right here. What I've done and what I like to do is I like to have a page on the report, and it could be a hidden page that just has a button on a page that will navigate you to it. And it has basically just like 4 Q&A visuals on it so that the user could populate their questions as they go along. So here I might just select this option right here. And then here I might say show profit. And then over here, I might choose this option. And then over here, I might start with this option, but then narrow it down for 2021. So these are the different things that I might do. And now I've created my own interactive report, or what a lot of people think of when they think of dashboards. The true dashboard in Power BI, I typically only like to use to create alerts and flows, but this is a great use for giving someone their own personal dashboard. And they can, again, make a bookmark on this once they have their app in place, and then they have their own personalized and custom visual. And so if you're not using Q&A a lot because you thought maybe it's just a little basic, then I strongly take advantage or suggest you use the Q&A tooling here, because not only can you, let me get my pen, not only can you create your synonyms, and of course you could do that on the model mode or the relationship mode as well, but you could create your own suggested questions. And keep in mind, once you enter the first one in, the rest of the out of the box questions are going to disappear. So you want to make sure that you have that in full mode. You could teach phrases that are go beyond synonym into Q&A. And then finally, you could look at all of the Q&A questions that people are asking throughout all of your system. And that's going to be a great tool as a data modeler and as a report designer as to what people are looking at and what you want to see. And if you do something like that, I guarantee you someone is going to move into your champion area. No question. Another common reason that people resist is they're worried there's not going to be sufficient training. And this is quite a big one. So here is, and I did not put this, shame on me for not putting this link in here. This is the roadmap slide link. And let me see if I could get to it. And here you go. And I'll put it in the chat. And because it won't be on the link, but it's basically the Power BI roadmap. And if I were to just tuck it in right there, you can now see it. So we'll leave it up there now. There is a section in the Power BI roadmap, the adoption roadmap on mentoring, and it talks about some best practices for mentoring. So this is something else that I strongly recommend because people will want help. One of the things that they'll want is something I've talked about from the very beginning, and that is that as they start playing with it on their own they're going to want some coaching. They're going to want to grow a little bit. So this is a great article in here in Microsoft Docs that talk about how to deal with this. And mentoring is quite a big deal. It's something that's a little new that we're not quite used to. We're kind of used to, those of us who've been around the block a while, we're kind of used to showing someone how to use something and then we just show them new features from that point forward. But in this particular area, I mean, the growth rate of Power BI is so dramatic that people will go out and learn and do things on their own again, which is fantastic, but they're going to need some help and some guidance more than likely. Now, I like to give them the smart analytics or the smart narratives as well. And this is what you see here on the right in the text. This is a great way to provide users something that's easy for them to start understanding. So if they have text here, and as they start clicking around on the report, the text kind of gives them a dynamic way to understand some of the data that they're looking at. They're going to find this to be informative as well. And just having this information alone could benefit people. Chris, Microsoft MVP and friend of Fernando's and mine, Chris Wagner, he was showing us this report he was doing where it looked like a newspaper. So you'd give the executive a newspaper every morning. And that's kind of what this smart narrative does here. So this is something that I really like doing. And I guarantee you that is going to move someone over, particularly people who are more comfortable reading text than numbers. They're probably going to want to move over as well. Another thing that you can do is just in the report itself, build in some additional learning pieces of information. So what I've done here on this report, and I don't have should have created a little bit of video showing this in action, but I have this information button or help button up at the top. And when you click on it, then it pops this little like tooltip type window on the screen. So it pops it up so that I get a better understanding of what this graph is really telling me. So this is something, and it could be done with bookmarks even. So if you select that and you put it on with a bookmark, maybe you could see what everything is and what it means at that point. And this is going to be something that's going to help your users as well. So whether it's bookmarks or tooltips, or just using the actionable buttons in a creative way, then this is something really cool. Another friend of Fernando's and mine was telling us the other day, something that I've been wanting to try and I just haven't done it yet, is he creates a GIF and then puts a GIF on on a screen, and it has it pop up, and it kind of in the pop-up, it just ends up displaying a little video that explains it a little bit more, like maybe how you would click on things and do things. And with that, I guarantee you, you're going to get someone moving over. And then finally, we're at the people don't like change, period. They just don't want to change. And so we have to combat this as well. And one of the ways we can do this is by taking Power BI reports to where users are working, whether that is Microsoft Teams, whether that is a mobile device like an iPad, or iPhone, or Android, or from the Microsoft Store. You could actually get Power BI, which is a mobile experience, a full screen mobile experience. So they're not having to go into the Power BI service to look at their data. Now, I'm a big advocate of the Power BI app. I don't like to have report consumers diving around inside of workspaces. I find that workspaces can be confusing to them. So for some of those people, you might want to just always recommend the download of the Power BI, which is again basically a mobile type environment, or a consumer only version of Power BI right on their desktop. It will again limit what they see and where they can click, and it's going to make for a cleaner experience for them. And there's always going to be that Excel person. I guarantee you, you're going to have some dissent from that Excel person. So one of the things you could do once you get your data model in place is show that Excel person how they could access the Power BI data set, that single source of truth, right from within Power BI. And you might even want to work on, I've had success with people taking them under my wing. So they're helping me test the validity of those Power BI data sets. And one of the things that you might even want to consider doing when you do this is take advantage of, once you get them done, go ahead and certify them, go ahead and make them promoted. It'll make it easier for users. I guarantee you, once your Excel person starts using Power BI inside of Excel, the data set itself, they're going to start taking their journey. They're going to start expanding slowly and getting more involved in Power BI. So that person will maybe at first do it quietly, but they'll eventually end up on your champion side, I guarantee you, because they're going to be excited. So embrace those Excel people, even the ones that are dissenting right away. Another thing we can do to help with change is provide our end users with a user experience that's good. So the way we design our reports, the UI, the user interface, is what you create for them. The UX is the experience the user has with that user interface. So definitely take that into consideration. So this is a real screenshot from my phone. And you can see it happened at 11:08 in the morning, and it was on March 8th that I pulled the report up. My husband and I were in the road. We're like, COVID's going down. He's like, what are the COVID cases? I pulled it up. This is South Carolina, our Department of Health. And so I pulled it up and I saw, 91 cases as of Sunday. And he's like, oh, is that Sunday? I said, I don't know if it's Sunday. It could be Sunday. It could be March 1st through March 6th. Could be year to date. I know it's not cumulative to date. There's the total. So I don't know what new represents. So make sure that the users understand what you're showing them when you have it on the screen. Make sure that user experience is really good. It is going to make a difference for your users. This is a book I recommend, especially to all of my developer friends, even those that are doing Power Apps. It's not a big book. It's an interesting book. It's been around forever. Almost every single developer I know has read it. And early on in the book on page 9, they talk about these usability attributes. And I think these are important, so I bring them up. You don't have to get the book to see these, but make it useful, make it learnable, make it memorable, make it effective, efficient, make it desirable, and make sure you remember to delight the user. So this is a really good book. You could see it's web and mobile usability. It's on its 3rd edition. Again, it's considered to be, for developers, one of the top books out there. And then we have, oh yeah, so Fernando was even talking about, I just saw your comment, Fernando. A lot of people are going to ask, can they export it to Excel? So I see Microsoft making changes in like how you could take some like a matrix and you can dump out matrix information in summary form, and then there's some detail. That's something that's out there now, so you could show them that. But I think those are, but that's something people are definitely going to ask about. So going ahead and addressing the Excel thing is going to be pretty cool. Also, we're almost done with my slide deck, and then we can start chatting about it. But I want to bring up naming conventions. So first of all, hopefully we're all building star schemas, right? Where we have fact tables, or data tables, they're often called, and dimension tables or lookup tables. And those are the things we filter on, and the data tables or the fact tables are the things that we actually report on, like what's our total sales and so forth. And hopefully you are not naming them like all the examples that people use when they're explaining it, dim whatever and fact whatever. Make the names of your queries, please, I beg you, and the names of your fields something logical to the end users. So first of all, keep them, well, let's just stick with making them logical. Class space name or clothing space ID, division space name, as opposed to div NAM or div NBR or FLD1 MBR. I mean, those things mean nothing to the end users. Make the name something logical, embrace the space, put spaces in M, and DAX know how to handle the spaces. So go ahead and put the spaces in. That's the way users think. It's a better optimization for Q&A as well. So everyone's going to be a lot happier. Make the query name something that makes sense, and something that I've started doing as of late, and I really need to update my slide here. On my date table, I don't call it the date table anymore. I call it the calendar table. And the reason I call it the calendar table is because of the date field in it. I don't like telling people to go to date. I think that is confusing. So I much prefer to send them to calendar dates. So I find that to be a little bit easier, but use names that make sense to users. Your life will be easier, their life will be easier, and everyone will be happier. When you are in the relationship mode or the modeling mode, is actually what it's technically called. I like to call it the relationship mode. One of the things that I like to do, and I do this also in the data mode tab as well, is I go through and hide all of the fields that my relationships are on with other queries. And the reason I do that is because these are my dimension queries, and then this one is my fact query or fact table. And so if I want to filter by clothing ID, I want them to get clothing ID from the dimension query or the lookup query, not from down here. Because if I also have another fact table for budgets, and I have a relationship to all of these, well, I wouldn't have one to rating, but in this particular case, we'll just mark that out. If I filter clothing ID here inside of sales, it will not filter the budget. I'm going to have to filter the clothing ID up here for it to filter both of these together. So by all means, hide the field. That way nobody has to wonder which field do they use and which, why are there two out there? So that's something else that I like to do. Another thing I like to do is, and I do this on this particular screen, is I come in and don't know how I think I clicked on something on my pin. I have a folder. So on this screen, using the properties, which is close up, I will put, if I have a lot of amount fields, I'll put all my amounts in a subfolder. And the reason I do this, and I didn't quite do them all, because you can see I still have some down here. Looks like I didn't move any of these, but I like to move them all because then it reduces what the users are looking at when they go to select something. So that's something else that I like to do. Now, once you get that last person over, then you're like, okay, are they going to work for everyone? Because what about that dissenter at the end? Well, no, it's not going to work for everyone. These tips aren't going to work. You'll probably still have someone stuck in the middle. You might have someone try to go to the dissent side or the resistor side, but there's always hope that peer pressure will cause that dissenter to move over closer to the champion side. Therefore, they leave the dissenter role. So you never know. It does happen. I've seen it happen a lot. And it should happen with Power BI because there is so much value in it. You know it and I know it. And it's just a matter of helping other people to know it. And and cool. So yes, and someone was pointing out, was that Fernando? Yeah, pointing out Bravo. Bravo is the new tool from the SQL BI guys. So if you haven't seen that, you should play with it. But this is my contact information. My Twitter is Ms. Belinda Allen. My LinkedIn is Ms. Belinda Allen. My main website, which needs drastic updating to my 2 blogs. I have one blog for GP ERP system and one for Power BI. It's in sorely need of updating, but it's also Ms. Belinda Allen. So I tried to connect myself right there. So that is, oh, and one more thing that I want to share with you, one more deck. Or one more, and I didn't put this at the end, but I'm going to type it in. And this is the blog for Matthew Roche. Some of you probably know Matthew from Roche's Maxim, build as far or make changes as far upstream as possible and downstream as necessary to have better performance in your Power BI report. Matthew's part of the customer advisory team for Power BI at Microsoft. And this is his blog. And he is also on the bandwagon of user adoption. So that being said, I'm going to stop my slideshow and then let's talk and open up the floor for questions and comments and anything that anybody wants to talk about.
Absolutely. Thank
Am I
you.
still sharing? Am I still sharing my slide?
No, I don't see anything.
Okay.
Yeah, anybody has any questions for Belinda?
Thank you very much, Belinda. Great session. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Fernando. And a special thanks to Fernando, because it was awfully kind of him to come today. He's such a sweetheart. This is not the first time he heard this session. You notice that there's a dash between the word end and user, because I initially didn't put it in there. And he pointed out it sounded like I was trying to stop user adoption with end user adoption. So I had to go back and put it in. And Fernando and I are part of a study group that meets every Saturday morning, and we call ourselves SML. And so if you ever see hashtag SML, that's part of a group we belong to. And he was kind enough to help me vet out some of my material and some of my concepts. So I'm curious, Suresh, since we don't have a question right now, is there something special that you and your company do to promote those end users? I mean, it's real easy to get adoption from the higher ups because they're closer to the people who are mandating a strategy we put in place. But what about the end users? What are you getting from them?
Right, that's an interesting open-ended question, Belinda. In a lot of different scenarios, while I work with these organizations, right, the client organizations, we run into this all the time where, everybody is excited about Power BI, but they don't know where to get started and how to use the product properly, right? And some people take time, they go through the learning curve, but a lot of them try a few things, they get frustrated, and then they just go away. They don't adopt it at all. Mm-hmm. So like you mentioned within your presentation, there are a lot of elements. There is training element, there is creating champions, so they can reach out to somebody who, when they get stuck with it, because not everybody is on the same pace, right? Some people learn it faster, some people, take their own time. right? So a lot of these things come into play. What we have done successfully is establish this kind of user groups in pretty much every single organization we've been working with. And we worked with the managers and wanted to support these champions. So what we worked with the managers is like coming up with a plan to incentivize these people for taking this initiative and taking it forward, right? Maybe they can get certified, and that's going to be their part of their performance review every year, right? So yeah, a lot of good points that you shared. Some of them we have already implemented. Some of them, obviously we're going to you take a look at it, understand, and try to apply going forward.
Yeah, really trying to make it in my mind, what I've seen when I'm working with different people is whatever you could do to eliminate the confusion, especially in the early phases of the system, so they could get comfortable with what they're looking at. That really seems to be beneficial to them. And so it's a kind of a way of baby stepping them through it. So, I mean, maybe even to a point of having, and this is something I haven't thought about till now, but like a 1, 2, 3 report, like we're going to walk you through looking at this one visual that exists on a report, and we're going to do it in a series of pages so that you understand what it is you're looking at. That might be something pretty fast. Oh, I love that idea. Okay, I got to write that down when I'm done. So wow, thank you, Suresh. I don't know, you just made me pop that one in my head. So love it. Okay. But yeah, it's something like that. And the usability of I don't know, people have love-hate affairs with bookmarks on reports. They could be challenging for sure, but I think anything that you could do that makes it easy for people to pull up, like, oh, this is what this visual is meant to show me. I get it. It's going to be beneficial. And so, John, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit with your restaurants. Do you share reports with your restaurant managers?
We sure do. I was just going to say one of the things I think worked for us on the user adoption side is every week our CFO gives the business update using Power BI, various Power BI reports, so that the audience gets used to seeing Power BI, and he talks about what he's clicking on and what it means, and the repetition of doing that every single week really helps people understand the tool and how to measure